Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Poetry. I'm Lorie and today I'll be sharing with you some poetry from the Collected Poems, Complete and Unabridged, the poetry of Robert Frost. We're going to start with The Tuft of Flowers. I went to turn the grass once after one who mowed it in the dew before the sun. The dew was gone that made his blade so keen before I came to view the leveled scene. I looked for him behind an aisle of trees. I listened for his whetstone on the breeze. But he had gone his way, the grass all mown, and I must be, as he had been, alone. As all must be, I said within my heart, whether they work together or apart. But as I said it, swift there passed me by, on noiseless wing, a bewildered butterfly, seeking with memories grown dim or night, some resting flower of yesterday's delight. And once I marked his flight go round and round, as where some flower lay withering on the ground. And then he flew as far as eye could see, and then on tremulous wing came back to me. I thought of questions that have no reply, as would have turned to toss the grass to dry. But he turned first and led my eye to look at a tall tuft of flowers beside a brook. A leaping tongue of bloom the scythe had spared, beside a reedy brook the scythe had bared. The mower in the dew had loved them thus, by leaving them to flourish, not for us, nor yet to draw one thought of ours to him, but from sheer morning gladness at the brim. The butterfly and I had lit upon, nevertheless, a message from the dawn, that made me hear the wakening birds around, and hear his long scythe whispering to the ground, and feel a kindred spirit to my own, so that henceforth I worked no more alone. But glad with him I worked as with his aid, and weary sought at noon with him the shade, and dreaming as it were held brotherly speech, and with one whose thought I had not hoped to reach. Men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart. And that's The Tuft of Flowers. And in this time of working from home and social distancing, that one really meant something to me, and I hope it means something to you as well. The next one is my favorite of the Robert Frost poems. It's called Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And that's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, which it looks like this evening might be, as is so common in Syracuse and central New York in April. And finally, The Bad Island, Easter, perhaps so called because it may have risen once. That primitive head, so ambitiously vast, yet so rude in his art, is as easily read for the woes of the past as a clinical chart. For one thing alone, the success of the lips so scornfully curled, has that tonnage of stone been brought in a ship halfway round the world? They were days on that stone. They gave it the wedge till it flaked from the ledge. Then they gave it a face. Then with tackle unknown, they stood it in place on a cliff for a throne. They gave it a face of what was it? Scorn of themselves as a race for having been born? And then having first been cajoled and coerced into being beruled? By what stratagem was their cynical throng so cozened and fooled and jollied along? Were they told they were free and persuaded to see something in it for them? Well, they flourished and waxed by executive guile, by fraud and by force, or so for a while, until overtaxed in nerve and resource they started to wane. They emptied the aisle, except for a few, that can be but described as a vile residue, and a garrulous too. They were punished and bribed. All was in vain, nothing would do. Some mistake had been made, no book can explain, some change in the law that nobody saw except as a gain. But one thing is sure, whatever culture they were made to parade, what heights of Altrurian thought to attain, what heights of Altrurian thought to attain, not a trace of it's left, but the gospel of sharing. And that has decayed into a belief in being a thief and persisting in theft with cynical daring. And that is The Bad Island, Easter, perhaps so called because it may have risen once. And that is the collected poetry of Robert Frost. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Lunchtime Poetry. I'll see you tomorrow at noon here on the Manlius Library YouTube channel. You could always find me at www.manliuslibrary.org. And if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them on the video or send me an email at lfinger@manliuslibrary.org. Thanks. Have a great day and happy Poetry Month.